Welcome to The City That Votes, a new television series from the Chicago Board of Elections, taking you behind the polling place curtain for a look and listen at how our election system works in the Windy City. I'm Max Bever, Director of Public Information for the board, and your host for the program. In Chicago, voting seems to be hardwired into our DNA. I know many folks who even consider Election Day to be their favorite holiday, or at the very least, placing it somewhere between 4th of July and Arbor Day. And every year on Election Day, over 8,000 people get up before dawn, 4 a.m., even 3 a.m., and help administer our city's election operations, one of the largest in the whole country, with over 1.5 million registered voters. And who are these hopefully well-caffeinated people staffing our polling places and vote centers? Well, they're our next-door neighbors, students and seniors and everyone in between, thousands of registered voters who serve as our essential election judges and coordinators. They volunteer to protect the rights of all voters to cast their ballots independently and in a safe and quiet atmosphere, free of interference and intimidation. They are the people power behind the city that votes. So when you're at the polls, you may have also found yourself wondering, how are these judges chosen? How do they get trained? What do they get paid? And what else do they do to wrap up at the end of Election Day? We're going to discuss those questions with Giovanna Carrillo, Community Service Representative and leader of Hispanic Outreach for the Chicago Board of Elections. Giovanna, thanks for coming to our very first episode of The City That Votes. And before we get into our topic of our conversation, can you tell me a little bit about what you do at the board?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I look after Hispanic Outreach for the board. What does that entail in? So I recruit poll workers from election judges and election coordinators to early voting officials. I oversee all Spanish translation of election materials, and I work with media, community organizations, elected officials, and government agencies to ensure that Latinos and Spanish-speaking people have a smooth election day.
I know you do almost as many media interviews as I do when it comes to Election Day, so we're always putting you to work. So let's jump into the conversation today. You do a lot of recruitment throughout the entirety of Chicago to find election judges and coordinators. Tell me a little bit about the duties of an election judge. What are they trained to do on Election Day?
Yeah, so when you walk into a polling place, the people who are going to greet you there and help you vote are our election judges. Typically about 5 to 7 people, and their duties include everything from setting up, putting up signage, to setting up the voting equipment. They help check in voters, offer special assistance for language or accessibility needs. They guide voters throughout the voting process, and they close the polls at the end of the day.
Lots of duties. So we were talking about election judges, but there's also a position called an election coordinator. Can you tell me some of the differences between their duties?
Yeah, so an election coordinator, you'll typically see one in a precinct or a polling place. They are typically in charge of voter registration, operations, and troubleshooting. So they do a little bit of everything, and they actually serve as an extension of the board at these polling places.
Troubleshooting, so that sounds like they've got a couple of tech duties, or the people who are a little bit more tech savvy to be at the polling place to deal with any issues, right?
Correct. They do receive extra training. They're walked through very thoroughly all of these scenarios that they might encounter on that day, specifically with our check-in tablet and some of the equipment.
Now, I know this is going to be a question that our viewers have, but what do they actually get paid between our judges and coordinators?
Yes, so for election judges, they get paid $170 for serving on Election Day and $60 for the training, for a total of $230, while coordinators get paid $450.
I suppose that's why it's a slightly more popular position to apply for, right?
Correct.
How do people apply in the first place?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways of applying. They can apply on paper or online. On paper, they can come into our offices at 69 West Washington and fill out an application. They can also meet us at one of the many community events that we're at, and they can apply with us. They can also call or email our office, and we'll be more than happy to mail out the application with a return envelope.
But we've got our online application. I think we can put that chyron down at the bottom here, which is pollworker.chicagoelections.gov. So if people are available to serve, especially for our upcoming March 17th primary election, they can go directly to that website. So what happens during the training sessions for judges? I know that they have to go in person now. We're past the video-only training of the pandemic, right?
Yes. So election judges receive 1 4-hour training. They go over the handbook, and in this handbook, which they also use on election day, it details everything from the start to the end of the day. We have an amazing team of trainers and assistant trainers, and they really walk them through what election day really looks like. And they also have 3 on-hand sections where they're able to actually touch the equipment, set it up, and break it down, so they're fully prepared. Our coordinators have 2 4-hour sessions, one which focuses on troubleshooting.
So I think it's always a good opportunity for the judges to get their hands on the equipment, to know how to set it up, how to break it down at each day. So I'm glad that we're back into in-person trainings for our judges moving forward. What's your experience been like at the board recruiting judges, especially when it comes to recruiting bilingual election judges?
Yes, it could be a bit difficult. It is a long day. It starts at 5 in the morning, and like you said, some people have to wake up at 4 in the morning or even 3 in the morning, and it is a long day. Polls close at 7 p.m., but they might not leave that early. So that can always be a challenge. People often have to take a day off of work or school to be there. But what we do is that we are available at different community events throughout the city, really talking and connecting with the residents, telling them more about the position and how fulfilling it can really be. It's literally the citizens that run the election. They're the backbone of the election, and they're helping their neighbors, their friends, their family members cast their vote. We have election judges who do this election after election, some for decades.
I had to smile a little bit when you said that, 7 o'clock might not be the time that you leave. I remember one of the last times I was serving as an election judge, I told my partner at the time, like, you know what, just pick me up at 7:10. We'll have things closed, we'll be done. Forgetting that, once you're in line, if you get in line before 7 o'clock at your polling place, you are still have the right to vote. And we had quite a line, so we weren't getting done until I think about like 8:30 or 9, which can happen on election day, right?
Correct. And sometimes that's the hope, right? The more people that are voting, the better.
So as a master recruiter, as you've been over the last few years of the board, what would you say is one of the biggest drivers? What motivates people to step up and serve as a poll worker for our elections?
The understanding that the elections are actually ran by the citizens, right? They're the ones being staffed at the polling places. It's not board employees, it's not government employees. It's citizens who are stepping up and helping their neighbors, their family members, other Chicago residents, and knowing that they are able to have this deep involvement is great, which is also why we even encourage those who may have questions or doubts about the election process to serve so they can see it on their own.
I remember that talking point a lot last year where, we naturally have to talk to a lot of people about elections, especially the doubts, concerns they have, maybe misinformation that they're dealing with. And one of the first things we always say is, hey, can you serve as an election judge? You might as well see the process from behind the curtain and see how many laws they have to follow, how much actually goes into prepping and closing election day. I feel like that really is the best experience for people if they've got a question about how our elections work. So what do you think is also the greatest barrier to people serving as a poll worker? I know that it's getting up early and it's a lot of work, but it's often a big challenge for election officials to get enough election judges. Thankfully, I think at Chicago Board, we've been fully staffed over the last at least 4 election cycles. But what generally do you hear as that type of barrier? What stops people from serving?
A lot of it is maybe not understanding the actual process and the duties. It can seem intimidating, right? You are running a polling place. What does that mean, right? Am I qualified for this? Besides our amazing training, it really can be simple in the sense that it is you helping your neighbors vote, right? You're setting up the equipment, you're overseeing everything. And that can really drive people. Which is why we're doing this, why you can go on our website, chicagoelections.gov, and we really break down the different roles. If you want to be an election judge, a coordinator, an early voting official, there's something for everyone.
So if you're ready to step up and serve, you can go to pollworker.chicagoelections.gov. But if you want to know some more about duties or differences between the poll worker positions or sign up as a poll watcher, you can go to chicagoelections.gov to learn more. Giovanna, I'd love to get back to a very important job you have at the office, which is focusing on recruiting bilingual election judges. I know that by law, we're supposed to cover a certain amount of precincts within the city to make sure that there's a Spanish-speaking judge there. We also, do all the different translations of forms and vote by mail, another discussion that I'd love to give into in a little bit. But ultimately, why is recruiting bilingual election judges so important for our city?
Yes. So I have the amazing duty of recruiting bilingual poll workers to fill at least 564 of our precincts. We hope to have at least one, right? And that's great. And this idea that we have this option for voters is great. But we actually need people to step up to apply and to show up on election day to be able to help our voters do that. Mm-hmm. And it's extremely important because, the election process can be intimidating, especially if you've never voted or you've never voted in this country before. You might not know the language proficiently. It might be comforting to know that, yes, our ballot is by default in English and Spanish, mm-hmm. our paper ballot, and we do offer 12 languages, including Spanish, of course, on our touchscreen. But you may have questions. You have to check in. You have to interact with these election judges. So it must be nice to know that, someone is going to be there to help me if I have any questions in Spanish, mm-hmm. or if any other of our languages. If you have any questions, they can answer that for you. It's comforting to know that your neighbors are there, your family members are there, that someone who looks like you is there.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for that. Let's try to test my aging memory here of the others. So we have Spanish, Chinese, Hindi, Polish, Korean, and Tagalog, which we also recruit bilingual election judges for Election Day. And then there's 5 additional languages on the voting touchscreen at early voting sites and vote centers in every precinct polling place. And that is Arabic, Russian, Ukrainian, Urdu, and Gujarati, right?
Yes, correct.
All right.
Awesome.
Thankfully, my memory is not as bad as I thought it was. So this is starting of a lot of difficult conversations we're having at the office right now, and I know out in a lot of the Spanish-speaking community too. And I know a lot of people are feeling scared. They're feeling worried, not just about upcoming election days and voting in them, but just about interacting with officials of government in any capacity. I just think that it's important to note that, our judges are not trained to try to put themselves in harm's way. We don't train our judges to try to deal with any interactions or anybody with a gun, and that judges are not both trained or allowed by law to check people's citizenship statuses. So these are part of the things that go into making sure that our polling places are safe, they're welcoming on Election Day. But how do you think that we can help people feel, both safe when they're voting and also serving as election judges next year?
Yes. So again, one of the best ways to help our fellow Chicago residents feel comfortable enough to show up on Election Day or during our early voting period is by stepping up and applying, right? Being able to let your neighbors know that, hey, I'm going to be working this polling place. Don't be afraid to come in and vote. Or if you have any questions, you can ask me. Mm-hmm. It could be your neighbor, your friend, your family member, and that always brings a sense of comfort, mm-hmm. even to know that, hey, I know that if I decide to vote, there will be someone there who can help me.
I think it just goes to show of how, much of a people-to-people type of business, this is. That our elections are run by our communities, and why that's so important for people to step up. So again, if you speak Spanish and you're free on March 17th, we urge you, please go to pollworker.chicagoelections.gov to serve either in the March 17th primary or in November later in 2026. There's many conversations I think the board is having, especially with people at the state, at the county, at the city, when it comes to a coordinated safety and response plan. So I think that we are putting in the work, and we'll continue putting in the work, because it's absolutely essential that our city's voters feel safe, that they feel welcomed into their polling places, and that their civic duty remains uninterrupted throughout this process. But there is always a little bit of a contingency plan, especially if you can't make it on Election Day, that I'd love to talk about a little bit. And this is something that you also promote out when you were at events in the community, but our Vote by Mail program. And that also comes in 7 different languages?
Correct. So you can request a ballot. You can request a ballot to be in Spanish or any of the languages that we offer, and even the application for the Vote by Mail ballot is also available in Spanish, which is great. So if you don't feel comfortable going out on election day, you can always submit your ballot by mail. So you're able to do that. Then.
Well, vote by mail is really a growingly popular program within this city. Before the pandemic, you were still only seeing about like 8%, 10% of voters. They had recently changed the law that you didn't need to provide an excuse. It used to be called absentee voting. You had to send in a doctor's note. Now we don't have that requirement. And so if you want to vote by mail, you can also sign up for our permanent vote by mail roster. In fact, that application is currently open at chicagooelections.gov. Go to our vote by mail page. Otherwise, if you'd like to apply just to vote by mail in the upcoming election, that will be open on December 17th. So you can come back to our website at chicagooelections.gov and choose to vote by mail starting on December 17th for the upcoming primary. So we've addressed a couple of difficult topics, but I'd love to go talk about a bit of good news and something that you mentioned a little bit earlier at the top of this show, which was your work recruiting students, specifically high school students and college students. And I'm happy to say that I think Chicago really just has one of the strongest programs in the entire country. That election after election, we're seeing nearly or over 2,000 high school students and college students step up and serve, which is over a fourth of our entire poll worker force. And as I found out, is one of the highest percentages and rates in the entire nation. So what goes into some of your work in working with high schools out there as well as colleges, and what motivates students to step up and serve?
Yes, so our community services department has a great program for high school and college students. We work with public schools, charter schools, city colleges, and other universities to recruit students. They welcome us into their space for us to be there, talk to students, host voter demonstrations, and really talk and connect with the students about the importance. But we also see a lot of students excited, not all of them, but a lot of them who might be interested in elections or in government, knowing that they can have a real impact by helping their neighbors. Again, it can be a little difficult to recruit election judges overall, but some things that are very enticing for our high school and college students are that it looks great on the resume. They also get paid for the day, which is something definitely nice for them to have, just for one day of work. So yeah, we love our students. We love that they step up and work, and we really need them election after election.
Yeah, the last couple of times I voted on election day, it's just a very different experience to see young people at the forefront. I feel like there's all of these kind of, the line is, oh, well, it's only senior citizens, or it's only the people who are retired or that have the time to serve as an election judges. And I think that Chicago just proves that that's not true. And we have so many people that are excited, both to be a part of democracy, or maybe to have the day off from school, or to make that $230 when you really need that as a 17-year-old. But we are heading into a primary election where there is slightly different rules in Illinois than other places. And we're heading into an election on March 17th where 17-year-olds can actually vote as well as serve as election judges, right?
Yes. So if if we have a high school student who is a junior or senior, they're able to apply. Recently graduated students, again, college students are also able to apply, which is great.
There is one requirement for our student judges that I find a little bit annoying, and I wonder if they'll ever address in Springfield, but there are some additional requirements for high schoolers, not just of getting permission, but there's a grade point average requirement.
Yes, they do have to have at least a 3.0 GPA, and like you said, it's a little bit annoying, but I think the great thing about the way that we work very closely with the schools is that they actually do receive permission from the principals to be absent that day, which brings some comfort to parents as well, that they're not just missing a day of school. The schools are aware, they encourage it, and they're doing something great for their community.
Right, and I do, they're also working on making Election Day a school holiday in Illinois, so I think there's a lot of effort behind making sure that our young people are actively involved, they're voting or they're serving on Election Day too. But when it comes to that GPA requirement, I know that it continues to be a topic. If it's something that interests you, we do urge you to reach out to your local state representative, your local state senator, and talk about how some of these restrictions for student judges can be changed for the future. As we get to a bit at the end of our program here, Giovanna, I wondered if you had any final thoughts about your time at the board and working with people to get them signed up as election judges. And maybe let's talk about a little bit of your experience on actually election day. You know, I think that both of us hardly get any sleep. It's kind of a long 24 hours being up, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually, before I joined the board, I served as an election judge throughout high school and college, and it was something very fulfilling. I never really expected that I would actually be working on the other side at the board, and like I said, it has been a very fulfilling experience where I get to really connect and work with my community and ensure that voting is as accessible as possible. And we do that by working with the public, with community organizations, the amazing staff at the board, and all of the resources that we offer. So it doesn't just feel like showing up to work, it feels like I'm actively helping my community, and more so on election day where we actually see all of our work going to fruition by being there at the board, answering phone calls by Election Central. If anyone needs any help with translation, I'm there to answer the phone. If any of the election judges that I recruited need any last minute assistance, we're there for that. It's a very busy, very hectic day, a lot of interviews, a lot of meetings. But at the end of the day, we know that we did the best that we could to make sure that all Chicago residents were able to have a smooth election day.
Election Central, I'm glad that you brought that up because you're up there, I think, on the 22nd floor of 69 West Washington with a lot of people. That is where all of the lawyers, all of the different coordinators and people at the board are ready to take your phone call if you're an election judge, if there's issue, if there's a technical issue, if there's a safety issue, they're all getting called down to Election Central downtown, right? So if you are serving as an election judge, Election Central will always be your first call if there's any issues at the polling place. But thankfully, in the city of Chicago, I think we're proud to say that we have seen no major interruptions, no major public safety events over the last few election cycles, especially for a year as hectic as 2024 and the presidential elections. And we'd like to keep that going heading into 2026. Giovanna, since we have just a little bit more time, and this is a community program, do you want to give any shout outs to some of the community partners, the community organizations that you work with, that people can learn more about or go visit their websites online or maybe even send them a donation?
Yeah, of course. I have the privilege of working with so many community organizations throughout the year and the last 3 years that I've been here, a lot of them being Latino-focused organizations. Some of those are Casa Central, Latinos Progresando, Increase the Peace, MALDEF, Advancing Asian American Justice, which has also been a great partner, not necessarily for involvement with the Latino community, but just working to making voting accessible for everyone.
Well, thank you for those shout outs. I want to make sure that this is, you're seeing basically almost the entire communications department of the Chicago Board of Elections on your screen right now. But there's just so much work that's being done out in the community by these organizations, and we thank them for their work. So thank you to Giovanna for joining us today to discuss this important issue. And if you're free on March 17th and ready to serve, you can go to pollworker.chicagoelections.gov to apply, or go to chicagoelections.gov to learn more about the duties of being a poll worker. Thank you for joining us on our very first episode of The City That Votes from the Chicago Board of Elections. Please give us a follow on social media. We are at Chicago Election on Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And you can contact me at communications@chicagoelections.gov and let me know what you might want to know more about behind the scenes at the Chicago Board of Elections. Until next time, I'm Max Bever, Director of Public Information for the Board, and thank you for tuning in.